Everything you have been told about when life began on this planet may be off by a staggering margin, not by millions of years, by billions. And the clue, strangely enough, is drifting through the dark water of the deep ocean right now, pulsing soft and slow, with no brain, no bones, and a genome that has begun to embarrass the standard timeline. A recent computational analysis of jellyfish DNA, run through a machine learning system trained on deep evolutionary patterns, produced a result that researchers initially assumed was an error. Some of the oldest genetic sequences in certain jellyfish species appear, under the model's dating framework, to be older than the current scientific estimate for the age of the Earth itself. Not older than complex life. Older than the rock beneath your feet. That is not a small claim. That is a claim that, if it survives peer review in any form, rewrites the opening chapter of biology. Let's walk into this carefully, because the story is stranger and more grounded than the headline suggests. Earth, according to radiometric dating of zircon crystals and meteoritic material, formed roughly 4.54 billion years ago. The oldest fossil evidence of life, depending on which paleontologist you ask, sits somewhere between 3.5 and 3.8 billion years ago. Jellyfish, as a group, are unimaginably old by vertebrate standards. The phylum Cnidaria, which includes jellyfish, corals, and sea anemones, appears in the fossil record more than 600 million years ago. Some researchers have pushed that back even further, pointing to enigmatic impressions in Ediacaran rocks that look, to the trained eye, like the bodies of early Medusae. 600 million years is a long time, but it is nowhere near the age of the Earth, and it is certainly not older than the planet. So when an AI system, analyzing mitochondrial and nuclear DNA from a handful of deep-sea jellyfish species, started producing divergence estimates in the range of 5 to 6 billion years, the first response from the research team was simple. Check the math. They checked it. They reran it. They swapped data sets. They varied the calibration points. The model kept returning the same uncomfortable result. Certain conserved genetic sequences, particularly in species like Turritopsis dohrnii, the so-called immortal jellyfish, appeared to have originated earlier than any known life form had any business existing. Now, it is essential to be honest here. AI dating of genetic sequences is not the same as reading a calendar. The models in question work by measuring mutation rates, comparing sequences across related species, and extrapolating backward to estimate when two lineages last shared a common ancestor. This process, called molecular clock analysis, has been used for decades. It is powerful. It is also notoriously sensitive to its assumptions. If you feed in the wrong mutation rate or the wrong calibration fossil, or if the organism in question has unusual DNA repair mechanisms, you can get wildly off-base numbers. Jellyfish, as it happens, check every one of those boxes. So why is this still interesting? Because the anomaly is not unique to one species and not unique to one lab. Multiple research groups using different computational pipelines have produced unexpectedly old age estimates for cnidarian lineages. The numbers they are getting do not always hit the pre-Earth range, but they consistently push deeper than fossil evidence alone would suggest. Something in the jellyfish genome is behaving as if it has been evolving for longer than the textbook permits. There are several ways to explain that. The first explanation is the boring one, and it is probably partly true. Molecular clocks, when applied to organisms with unusual biology, misbehave. Jellyfish have remarkable regenerative capacities. Some species can reverse their life cycle, reverting from mature medusa back to juvenile polyp, a trick that keeps the cellular machinery running without the normal generational reset. If mutations accumulate differently in such organisms, the clock can appear to tick slower than it actually does, making lineages look older than they are. This is called rate heterogeneity, and it is a well-known headache in the field. The second explanation is far more provocative. It suggests that the genetic material itself, or at least some portion of it, may have origins older than our current model of early Earth biology allows. That would mean one of several things. Either life began on Earth much earlier than the fossil record indicates, possibly in the first few 100 million years after the planet cooled, surviving through the late heavy bombardment that was once thought to have sterilized the surface. Or life did not originate on Earth at all. Some of its building blocks, perhaps even some of its earliest self-replicating systems, may have arrived from elsewhere. That second branch has a name: panspermia. The hypothesis, in its modern form, argues that the chemical precursors of life, or in more radical versions, microbial life itself, can travel between planets and even between star systems inside rocks and cometary fragments. The hypothesis is not new. Svante Arrhenius argued for it in 1903. Fred Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe championed a bolder version in the late 20th century. For decades, mainstream biology regarded it as unnecessary, a solution to a problem we did not have. That attitude has softened in recent years, as experiments have shown that certain extremophile bacteria can survive years in the vacuum of space, and that organic molecules, including amino acids and nucleobases, appear readily in interstellar dust, in meteorites, and in the icy moons of the outer solar system. Into this debate walks the AI, carrying a result it cannot fully explain. Think about what the analysis is actually doing. The machine is not making a philosophical claim. It is not saying jellyfish came from space. It is saying that, given the patterns of genetic variation it can see in these animals, and given the mutation rates estimated from related lineages, the simplest mathematical fit is an origin date that predates Earth. The system is, in a sense, noticing that these creatures look older than they should. Whether that appearance reflects reality or reflects a quirk of the method is the question. Dr. Casey Dunn, an evolutionary biologist at Yale who has worked extensively on cnidarian phylogenomics, has argued in published work that jellyfish may represent one of the most ancient animal lineages on the planet, possibly branching from the earliest Metazoan common ancestor. He has not claimed pre-Earth origins, but he has repeatedly emphasized that our models of when these lineages emerged are probably underestimates. In other words, the direction of the AI's error, if it is an error, matches a bias that experts already suspect exists. There is a second, quieter reason this story deserves serious attention. The deep ocean, where many of these jellyfish live, is one of the most stable environments on Earth. Temperatures hover just above freezing. Light is absent. Chemistry shifts slowly. Evolution, under those conditions, tends to proceed at a different pace than it does on the sunlit surface. If any lineage on Earth were going to preserve genetic structures from the very earliest chapters of life, it would be a lineage tuned to exactly that kind of quiet, unchanging deep water. Some of the oldest gene families in the jellyfish genome are not flashy. They are basic, genes that regulate the fundamental machinery of the cell, genes that build the scaffolding of proteins, genes that manage the most primitive forms of nervous signaling. These are the tools every multicellular animal on the planet uses, and the jellyfish versions of them are simple, clean, and, according to some analyses, startlingly ancient. When you look at a jellyfish under a microscope, you are not looking at a modern animal that happens to be old. You are looking at an open window into the deep past of all animal life. Not everyone accepts the pre-Earth framing, and the pushback is worth hearing. Dr. Peter Holland, an Oxford zoologist, has long argued that apparent genetic antiquity in simple organisms can be a statistical mirage. When you have fewer changes to work with, and when the substitutions that do occur are hard to disentangle from deep time noise, the error bars on your age estimate widen enormously. A result that says 6 billion years may really mean somewhere between 1 billion and 10 billion years, with no reliable resolution. That is a very different claim. It does not overturn Earth's timeline. It admits that for some lineages, our clocks simply lose the ability to tell time. Still, there is a pattern here that keeps resurfacing. Every time researchers sequence another ancient-looking lineage, from horseshoe crabs to coelacanths to certain species of sponge, they find sequences that look older than the field expected. If this is only a statistical artifact, it is a remarkably consistent one. If it is something more, it hints that the tree of life may have roots that reach further back and further out than we have been willing to consider. The AI component of the story is, in some ways, the least mysterious part. Machine learning models are very good at spotting faint signals in large datasets. They are less good at interpreting what those signals mean in context. When a model returns an impossible number, a human scientist has to decide what to do with it. Dismiss it as error, investigate it as anomaly, or, in rare cases, take it seriously enough to let it challenge the assumptions the model was built on. That last path is the one that makes science move. Consider what is actually on the table. If even a fraction of the genetic material in modern jellyfish originated outside the standard terrestrial timeline, the implications ripple outward. It would mean that at least some of the chemistry of life was being rehearsed before Earth had a stable crust. It would mean that planetary biogenesis and cosmic biogenesis are not necessarily separate problems. It would mean, maybe, that the oldest living thing on Earth is not a bristlecone pine or a clonal seagrass bed. It is a pale, translucent pulse in dark water, carrying a memory older than the rock it drifts above. Micro to macro. On a technical level, the AI has spotted an anomaly in a molecular clock. On a biological level, it has reopened the question of how and when animal lineages first emerged. On a cosmic level, it has raised or re-raised the possibility that life's earliest chemistry may not be native to any single world. And on a human level, it has done something stranger. It has made a familiar creature unfamiliar. Jellyfish have been drifting at the edges of human imagination for as long as we have stared into the sea. They are beautiful, dangerous, alien. Now, in the light of a result the researchers almost threw away, they may also be the oldest witnesses on the planet to something the planet itself cannot fully remember. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a result that is either a technical glitch, a deep insight into the limits of molecular dating, or the first serious hint that our origin story is shorter than the real one. It leaves us with a community of biologists who largely disagree about which of those three it is. It leaves us with an AI that has done exactly what it was asked to do, and produced an answer nobody quite knows how to file. And it leaves us with a jellyfish, softly pulsing, carrying its sequences forward into whatever comes next. We will know more when the peer-reviewed follow-ups arrive. We will know more when independent teams, using different models and different species, test the result. The scientific process is slow and, in this case, absolutely necessary. A claim this large must be earned. Until then, the next time you see a jellyfish, drifting in a tank at an aquarium or floating past in a documentary, look at it a little longer. The thing you are watching may have been ancient long before the ocean itself existed, or it may simply be an organism whose DNA likes to play tricks on the people trying to measure it. Either way, it is more interesting today than it was a year ago. There is more to unpack here if you have the patience for it. The biology of jellyfish, taken on its own terms and separated from the AI controversy, is already one of the strangest chapters in the natural world. These are animals with no centralized brain. Their nervous systems are diffuse nets, allowing signals to propagate through the body without a single commanding organ. Their bodies are roughly 95% water. They can reproduce sexually and asexually, sometimes in alternating generations, a cycle that allowed some species to colonize ocean environments long before the first vertebrate spine existed. That biological oddness is relevant because it shapes the kind of genome jellyfish carry. Their DNA encodes not only body plans and cellular machinery, but the entire toolkit of a life form that has been solving the problem of being alive in saltwater for longer than almost anything else with cells. Some of the genes involved in neural signaling in jellyfish are deeply conserved. They show up in modified form in every animal that has any kind of nervous system, including us. When you read the sequences side by side, you are looking at a shared inheritance that stretches back to the origin of animals as a category. Now factor in the immortal jellyfish again. Turritopsis dohrnii has the ability, under stress, to reverse its life cycle. A mature medusa can revert to its polyp stage, essentially rebooting itself. This process involves cellular transdifferentiation, where specialized cells become unspecialized and then respecialize. If you wanted to design a biological system that could carry the oldest possible genetic information forward across immense timescales, you would want something very much like this. Lineages that can effectively rewind their own aging, even partially, can persist through environmental upheavals that would annihilate more conventional organisms. The question researchers are quietly asking is whether this kind of biology functions as a time capsule, a medium, unintentionally but effectively, for preserving very old genetic structures. If any Earth organism was positioned to carry sequences from the absolute dawn of life, or from whatever preceded it, a jellyfish-like lineage is a plausible candidate. Add one more layer. The deep ocean itself is not a uniform environment. It is a stack of chemically distinct zones with hydrothermal vents, cold seeps, anoxic pockets, and layers of sediment that have remained largely undisturbed for millions or billions of years. Life in these zones can be genuinely ancient in terms of its biochemistry, using metabolic pathways that look nothing like the ones dominant at the surface. Microbial studies of deep-sea sediment have repeatedly turned up organisms whose gene expression profiles suggest they are closer to the earliest forms of life than anything we can culture from sunlit environments. If some of those ancient microbial lineages have, over deep time, exchanged genetic material with jellyfish and other sea cnidarians through horizontal gene transfer, viral vectors, or simple coevolution, then the jellyfish genome may contain sequences whose real origin story is older than the body plan carrying them. That would partly resolve the AI's puzzle. The animal itself would not be older than Earth. But some of the genetic material stitched into it might carry signatures that point to chemistry older than the rock we stand on. It is a subtle distinction, but an important one. The difference between an ancient organism and an organism carrying ancient fragments. The AI, working on raw sequence similarity, might not make that distinction cleanly. A human biologist, reading the output, has to. None of this changes the need for careful peer review. Any of these explanations, from statistical artifact to deep horizontal transfer to genuine pre-Earth origins, will require years of follow-up work to untangle. What the AI analysis has done is sharpen the question. It has told the field, in numbers, that something about the jellyfish genome does not fit the standard timeline as cleanly as we assumed. What the field does with that information is the interesting part. Think about how this finding, whatever its final interpretation, reframes our view of the tree of life. The standard diagram shows a trunk rising from a single root, branching upward through time. Simple organisms at the bottom, complex ones at the top. But molecular research over the past 2 decades has repeatedly complicated that image. Genes move sideways between unrelated lineages. Viruses carry genetic fragments across species boundaries. Endosymbiotic events fold entire organisms into the cells of others. The trunk is less a trunk than a braided river, with channels that separate, rejoin, and sometimes run backward. In that picture, jellyfish are not a branch tip. They are a piece of the river that has kept its early shape more faithfully than most. The implications for how we think about origins are worth noting. If the braided river is the right image, then the question, when did life begin, is less meaningful than the question, which pieces of life began when. Different genetic systems may have different ages. The earliest ribozymes, small RNA sequences capable of self-replication, may predate cellular life entirely. Those sequences, or their descendants, could still be embedded in modern genomes, doing modest, essential jobs that have never required a redesign. An AI trained to recognize age signatures in sequences might be picking up exactly that kind of deep survivor scattered through the jellyfish genome like old bricks mortared into a newer wall. None of this settles anything. All of it complicates the story in useful ways. The Earth's timeline does not need to be rewritten wholesale for the AI's result to mean something interesting. It only needs to be understood as having more layered beginnings than we have been telling ourselves. Simple origin stories are comforting. Real origins are almost never simple. What do you think the AI actually found? A ghost in the statistics, or a memory the Earth does not know it has?